becoming an open organization, becoming an open leader requires, get interested in the topic and deep dive a little bit. It's a relatively new way of functioning. I would invite you to start reading up. I would say go to the open practice library. There are definitions of open leadership and open organization. Deep dive into that.
Today we have Shabnoor Shah, Principal Open Leadership Global Lead and Executive Coach at Red Hat Show on the show. So welcome, Shabnoor.
Hi, glad to be here.
Nice. So the Engatica interview series is a powerhouse of insights from industry experts and influencers from around the world. A platform that provides the latest news on AI, automation, and technologies that will help you grow your business. So come be a part of our community, learn, share, and grow with us. So Shabnoor, we have some questions for you. So how to shape an open culture and open leadership mindset in an organization?
Hi, thank you. What a great question. It's also a very broad question. And while I'm tempted to jump in and tell you the how, I'm going to refrain from doing so momentarily and instead step back a bit. The reason for that is because I'm asked this question a lot, and I've been reflecting for many years, to find a perfect answer. And of course, there's no perfect answer. But what I've learned and realized is that if you are not an open organization, yet that is, and there is an interest or curiosity in becoming one, I think the most important question to begin with is asking yourself why should you become an open organization, right, before going into the how of it. So in my view, shaping an open organization culture and open leadership mindset in organizations need to begin with having a strong and even compelling reason, because we live in a VUCA world, that is a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And pandemic has showed us very clearly that we are not as much as in control of things that we would like to be. So how do you navigate in this kind of a world and continue to prosper is a question to ask. Well, that in itself is one of the strong reasons for choosing open, and be it open technologies, be it open processes, open leadership, open culture, creating or nurturing a positive, generative organizational culture, all powered by open and agile ways of working. So I'll give you a little bit of a spiel before I can open it for you to ask me questions. Like I said, I want to set a little context before I reach to the how of it. So um so like I said, why should you do this, like before you become an open organization, is because you will experience a relatively higher amount of agility, because you will be organized in such a way that your department or your teams are better aligned and working together on shared goals. And this allows you to move fast, to pivot fast, and of course to course correct as you're in your journey and make quicker, better decisions. And those are very important when you're running an organization, when you're taking decisions. The second reason you want to become open is to facilitate faster innovation, right? We're living in a fast-paced world, which is continuously changing. So innovation is when organizations undertake the process of conceptualizing and creating or developing new products, new technology, new processes, and ideas. Or it could also be to approach existing products and processes with a completely new ways of redefining it, right? So now imagine what what could that do to your customer experience, right, to your performance, to your profitability, to even your brand image, right, which is so important. And thirdly, openness is, when aligned with a clear vision, an inspiring vision, I would say, and followed by a mission and a strategy, leads to higher employee engagement, because employees see a direct connection and an impact between the work that they do and how it impacts organizational outcome. Now that you have these reasons why you want to be open, we can now look at how to do that, right? How do you become, like, to answering your question. um, and the most important piece is that if you're looking at becoming open, um, you need to it has to begin with organizational leadership, right? It has to begin with um, you know executive sponsorship, because you want this change to be sustainable and long term. And this is because with executive sponsorship, what you get is that you get a leadership stamp, which allows for organizations and teams to think, plan, and strategize and execute with confidence. um, and that's kind of a big booster for driving initiatives. It leads to commitment, and I think most importantly, what it does, it leads to accountability as well, right? So there has to be a combination of, like, you can have a lot of enthusiasm and passion, but there also has to be accountability built in, because there is an organizational objective. So having said that, once this role of leadership has been established, leaders should set, or provide a context, mutually agree on healthy guardrails. I would say looser the better, and then you get out of the way as leader and let people do their job. So I'm going to pause for a moment. I can give you some more examples, but let me see if you have any follow-on questions.
Well, I think we should go on with the examples because I'm really curious on this open culture thing, and then I would really
Yeah.
love an example to this one.
Yeah. So let me give you an example of Red Hat, right? So I work at Red Hat. I lead open leadership and in at a global role, and my job is to, like, not only conceptualize, um, crystallize, the whole concept of open organization, open leadership, but also make it consumable, right, for our customers. Right? It's not. It sounds. It's good when you talk of it as a philosophy, but then how do you bring it to the ground and make it happen? So that's where I will use the Red Hat example. So for us at Red Hat, open has always been the default way of doing things. Like, we have the advantage and the benefit of being an open source company, which means we've sort of naturally been able to bring aspect of open source development model, open ways of working, and open ways of leading into, it's a part of our DNA, so to say, right? And just that we have been doing this in open source communities, like that's how we develop uh, open source software. So we realized that what contributed to accelerated growth in open source communities, in software development, and how it has changed the technological and the business landscape, right? The you know the, it's there's an overlap, right? There are overlapping principles when applied to leading and managing. Organizations can have an incredible impact, that really unleashes human potential, and that gives me like goosebumps, right? It depends, it really deepens the whole employee engagement, like its power and the force. Because employees, when they're fired up, right, when they're inspired and they lead with passion to achieve organizational objective, nothing beats that, right? That's where I always say that's magic. So in that sense, being an open organization for us has been an evolutionary journey. However, most organization, it might not be the case, right? And we are mindful of that, and therefore, the aspect of mindset or mental model is so crucial, right? So when you're thinking of how do we begin, right? To summarize it, begin on not on how first, but on the why, right? Why do you want to be an open organization? And then is there leadership, executive sponsorship present? And then do you have the necessary mindset, right? So I'll tell you more, but I'm going to pause for a moment and check in if you have any follow-on questions.
Yeah, so there's this one question that I have, that how do you develop a corporate culture, like that kind of a strategy to manage and lead so effectively, like by applying those open management practices and with open leadership principles? So
Okay.
how does that happen?
Ooh, yeah. Okay, then you'll have to be ready for a like nice spiel
Oh,
before I
sure,
go
go
into.
ahead.
Okay.
All yours.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's never like one straightforward answer, and that's the reason I'll kind of go around, and you can ask me specific stuff, right? You mentioned corporate culture, strategy, leading, managing, management practices, open leadership practices and principles, right? So now
Yeah,
you fasten your seatbelt, and I'm just going to take you on a quick ride. So
sure.
any organization can commit to being an open organization, right? So I hear a lot like, but we don't we are not like that. We are a conventional organization, and we are we, do, we I mean, that's something that we don't relate to. So one thing that you can do is like be very clear and understand it doesn't matter what kind of an organization you are. You can always be an open organization. In fact, there might already be practices within your organization which are open, right? So just because you weren't familiar with open until now doesn't mean you're not an open organization. And that's why there's something known as the degrees of openness. um, so like for Red Hat, like we by default go for openness. So the level of openness in our organization, how we communicate, how we share information, how we take decisions, I would say is at an advanced level. But there could be conventional organizations where the degree of openness is not as much because of the hierarchical structures or the leadership models and styles, right? And that's fine. Like, but when you decide you want to be open, then you can move to that direction. So, and it's because even like two organizations are never the same, they don't look the same, so openness will mean different things to different organizations. So transforming into an open organization really means that you're embracing the principles that reflect open source values. So if you want to know how open you are, or if you want to decide to become open, there are 5 key characteristics that you could begin with, right? And these are the open organization characteristics. They are also known as the open leadership characteristics to gauge or assess your level of openness. The first one is transparency, where transparency is where materials or decisions, processes, communication are open, they're collaborative, and can be adjusted and revised as and when required, right? So you'll not be struggling to gain information, right? So at Red Hat, for example, our shared drive is open, right? The work that we do is open. And there could be context on how much transparency you want to create. Like if there is very private information, like for example human resources related information, salary related, or employee personal data, we need to respect and honor that, right? And also keeping in laws and regulations of a certain country, what can you make transparent or not, right? But by default, we at Red Hat tend to move to openness by default to the degree that is possible. The second characteristic of openness is inclusivity. And organizations that are inclusive, you will find that they seek out, they have a culture where they seek out diverse points of view and invite multiple perspectives into dialogue whenever possible. Now, it sounds really nice, but imagine if a perspective that's brought to the table is different to yours, or even contradicting yours, or if and that's where diversity becomes difficult, right? Because we like people or ideas that are similar to ours. And when somebody else has different opinions or ideas or different ways of looking at things, suddenly they become others, right? So inclusivity in organization needs to be practiced. It doesn't come naturally to us, right? But we benefit if you're able to transcend that barrier. It can help. So while I say inclusivity is big because it can really unleash a whole lot of ideas and facilitate collaboration and ideation and definitely innovation. Yeah. So the third characteristic of openness is adaptability. So flexibility and resiliency are the 2 key elements of these organizations that are oriented toward continuous learning and engagement, right? So you can be only adaptable when you're not rigid. You can be adaptable when you have resilient, that you're able to move fast and change when the need arises. Like, and sometimes because of fear we might freeze, or because of not knowing or not taking enough risk, we might freeze. And or we could just be rigid because I have an idea and I like it and I don't want it to change, right? That can prevent adaptability. So shifting, for example, shifting decision making to frontline of a business means teams can actually react faster to changing requirements, and that's so needed, as you might have seen. uh, you know what, I've been hearing this, it was needed a decade ago, 2 decades ago. It's needed now, and I think it'll continue, because we as humanity, we as a consciousness, and as businesses are continuously transforming, so we have to be able to adapt. The fourth characteristic of open is collaboration, right? This is where individuals in an open organization believe that work is better when there are more parties involved. And like I said, with other characteristic, it sounds so good, let's collaborate. But hey, guess, if you like to work alone, and if you like to have complete control on the things that you do, collaboration can be really hard, right? Because collaboration requires working together. It's not about sitting next to each other and working. That's not collaboration. Collaboration is like bringing ideas, bringing, challenging status quo, asking questions, creating together, co-creating together, which means you have to let go sometimes of your ideas, or you have to allow for someone else's ideas to be incorporated in your thinking, right? So, but if once you overcome the initial hump, then you see that collaboration can be such a powerful force. And you have to experience it firsthand, and it requires skill. All of these things that I'm talking about require certain skills to be developed in individuals and leaders and teams, because some things come to us naturally and some things don't. That's why learning is such an important aspect. um and last but not the least, open is linked with open source development model, so community has to be a part of it. Right? So open organizations are communal by default. It's all about community. It's all about shared values and purposes that guide these organizations, and are integral to their success or their failure, right? So the whole community mindset, that you contribute, you don't only take from the community, but you actually contribute. So a team can be a community, an initiative, like a department is a community in itself. Anything that brings you together with a shared common purpose becomes a community, right? So I will share with you a whole lot of links that you can share with the audiences. They can learn more, because there's just such amazing content that's already available. So that's the first piece. Do you have any questions before I progress with my
No, no, that's all right. But I really like how all the points are so interlinked to each other. Like
good
community is
observation?
so interlinked to adaptability, and then even the next one, collaboration. Collaboration is not possible without adaptability. I mean, that's so interlinked. Really
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah, no, good observation. You're very sharp, right, to see that linkage. So it doesn't work in isolation, as you can see.
Yeah, right.
Okay, so the next piece that I want to take. So this is again, I'll come back to your question about, right,
Right.
how to develop a corporate culture strategy, and it's not as straightforward. So that's the reason, like I said, I'm taking you through the whole journey around it. Now that you understand, within open organization, the five characteristics. Now
Right.
that we know the five characteristics of open organization, let me share more context. Now, to explain this, I'd let's refer to this visual that you have, and make it easy for our listeners to have a starting point, and then we can deep dive, right? So in this visual, what you're seeing is a representation of two types of classic organizations. One, on the left hand side, you have is a classic top down versus, and on the right you have bottoms up organization. Now these are two extremes, I'm saying, right? These are also ideal states. There's no right or wrong in it. But I'll give you a perspective that most organizations tend to be conventional, as we call them, or top down. And they focus on driving decisions and planning from the minds of a few, right? So it's consolidated authority in title and enforces hierarchy, right? And the main motivation for the majority of the associates, is or employees, as we say, we call associates at Red Hat, employees, is that largely, like I said, there's always a degree and there will always be other motivations, but largely you will see is employees look for, how can I get promoted, and go up in the hierarchy, because the only way to influence decisions or thought leadership of any kind, to be influential and powerful in the organization, is through hierarchy and being on the topmost, right? And that's our addiction to, in conventional organizations. How, when will I get promoted? I want to be at the topmost positions. Why do we want to do it? Like, it's good for ego as well, and also gives a sense of growth, but it's also because we can then drive decisions, right? And it's a way to gain power. On another reason for it, another motivating factor is compensation, right? Pay. We have families, we need to take care of our needs, and so I come here to a company, I'm a part of it. I'm not interested in getting promoted. I'll do the job that I have to do, get paid, go back, and that's about it, right? And that's how most conventional organizations tend to work. However, what's the difference between open organization is that starts with, it focuses on feeling the passion, right, at the bottom layer, and seeking purpose, right? All organization, no matter who you are in the hierarchy, but you're driven by purpose and passion, right? And to your question about how to shape an open organization mindset, like I said, it begins with identifying and defining a very strong purpose. I would say a compelling purpose that resonates and reverberates with people, right? That are part of that organization, or Simon Sinek's called it like finding the why for your organization. And I can give you an example of Red Hat. At Red Hat, we have our why is unlocking the world potential, to share knowledge and build upon each other's discoveries, to unlock world's potential to solve complex problems by bringing passionate people together to collaborate. Red Hat's why is to unlock the world potential to create communities where everyone is fully supported to use their voices and talents to contribute, and more. So we lead with that. Now imagine like that brings me to work every day at Red Hat, not for the just the job, but I see my role and my work as unlocking the world's potential through the work that I do. And different people do it with in different ways, because we are not clones, we don't do the same job, right? We're like we're bringing our brilliance in the organization and then contributing for the role that you've been hired through it. So in an open organization, the best ideas get a chance, and collaboration can pool collective wisdoms and leaders. And this is one thing, and this is a mindset thing. Can be a little hard. It sounds really nice when you're talking about it, but imagine if you're a leader, or if you're someone who likes to control and have a sense of authority and control. It can be a little hard to let go. But in open organization, the mindset is that leaders are not determined by their titles or their positions, right? And that's the premises or basis of open leadership as well, that anybody in the organization can be an open leader, right? uh, and it is a little intrinsic, so you'll have to deep dive into the open leadership definition and open organization definitions, which I'll share with you later on, so you can share as a link. But imagine if everybody can be a leader. It's not about so you're using your personal power. So um, I am a principal consultant, I'm a global lead, but then on there in the hierarchy, there are a whole lot of other people who are, in what would be perceived as powerful, influential positions, right? The CEO, for example, the CFO, or for example, the VPs, and God knows what. And it all sounds really fancy, but they're doing a different job. But in an open organization, I, as an employee, can go back to anybody in the company and share my concerns, question our leadership, all in a way that is psychologically safe and without the threat of being fired because I asked questions, right? Of course, there are ways and methods to do it. Like every organization has protocols. There are a communication message channels. Respect is always an important aspect, right? And if you're getting confrontational every time, right, and you're not having a healthy conversation, or that can cause people to shut down. So, right, understanding how we communicate, how you're creating impact through the ideas that you're bringing in. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, right? Because with freedom comes accountability and responsibility, right? So you have to take ownership for that as well. So the idea is that everybody has a voice, but it doesn't mean that everybody has a vote, right? And that's where sometimes it can becomes confusing, right? You say, okay, we are an open organization, everything we say should be agreed upon. No, if it's a business enterprise, there is a vision, there is an objective, there is a direction that the organization is going to. You might have your pet projects or pet passions, which is great within the context of the work. If it gets satisfied, it's fantastic. But if our actions are not in alignment with where the organization is going, right, you can give your feedback, you can give your input, right? And as an organization, as a leader, you should be able to create that context, right? If you're a manager within your team, you should be able to allow for that exchange and feedback to come in, but also an understanding that the decisions are taken in a way which are aligned with the objectives. And this would mean that even if your voice is heard, sometimes your suggestions might not be incorporated, right? And you should be okay with that, because if the larger team or the organization think that this is the way to do it, and the certain things have to be left behind, well, that's the way it is. So at an individual level, to be a part of an open organization, you also have to not only have courage to speak up, but also have the grace to accept that sometimes your idea is not accepted. Like, deal with that disappointment, and it's okay, but don't give up, right? Sometimes we tend to take things very personally, feel mad about it, and then the whole focus shifts. And that's where, as a learning organization, to self development, self awareness, personal development becomes so important, that you're able to deal with the dynamics of decisions, working with people, different types of ideas, dealing with rejections, ability to challenge status quo, and a host of things. I'll not go into that today, but just to give you an idea that these aspects need to be kept in mind, right? So you have a voice, but you might not necessarily have a vote, right? There are simple structures like open decision making framework, which gives you the guardrails to take decisions in the most open, transparent way, and which which can help you with open, inclusive decision making. And sometimes when people feel heard, they're able to kind of bring down or mitigate the level of resistance they might have, right, at some point in time, because they were part of the process, can make a huge difference in how they react. So, for example, at Red Hat, we consider ourselves as an open organization, right? And there's never you're never an absolute open organization, right? It never happens that you reach there. You have to continue working toward. It's like fitness, right? Just because you've reached a fitness goal doesn't mean you'll always stay there, right? You have to keep on exercising and dieting and doing all the right things. That's exactly how it is with open organizations as well. So something that we work towards is like, as Red Hat, to be an inclusive as possible, openly share information to the extent that is possible. If we can't share information, we give a context, right? Managers, they provide like, okay, this is up to a point. I can give you information right now. I can't give you beyond that because of whatever reasons. But I'm sharing whatever I can. You can ask me questions. You can, just share inputs and feedback, and I'll listen to you. And it's also about encouraging diverse perspectives, so that the best ideas will flourish, right? Again, it requires skill, it requires intent. And we also believe in being a community based organization, which means we value participations, and we have communities of practice within Red Hat and outside, which are modeled based on open source communities. Our intent is also to operate, transparently, defaulting first to, to open the information and the decision making process. So we have something known as a decision hub, where key organizational decisions are posted. People have an opportunity to critique it, to add to it, enhance it. But of course, there is a product team, there are product owners or initiative owners who like eventually take decisions. Otherwise it can become a country club. So we need to have those guardrails as well. And we also encourage everyone to be a leader, right? Like it doesn't matter where you sit in the hierarchy, whether you're a newcomer, whether a graduate intern, or you're like the CEO. You are an open leader by default, right? So step into becoming an open leader, right? It's good to be a follower, but how are you exercising your own leadership qualities? And it could look different for different people, right? And there are ways you can do that. Maybe we'll keep that for another session on how associates or employees can practice open leadership without having roles and titles, right? Yeah, and again, providing as much context as possible. So I'm going to pause and ask you if you have any follow-on questions.
No, this is really insightful. So I'm really enjoying the information here.
Yeah.
Like how individual leadership and individuality is so important. It is like really the essential part of all this.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you see that it's individual leadership, then team leadership, then there's departmental leadership, and then there is organizational leadership, then industry leadership, right? But it begins with self, right?
Right.
And there are different roles as well, and you need to have the related competencies and capabilities to be acting in those roles. And that's where you have to continuously invest in your development, because it's sometimes easier to work as an individual in your silo, and that's okay. But if you're planning to take on managerial roles, or more active combination of managerial, people management, and leadership roles, then you need to develop yourself. And like I said, that's a topic in itself to talk about. um, so this was about, like, from an organizational perspective, like, to answer your question, how do you create culture or a strategy around it? So look at how are you organized now? What is You do an assessment of the current reality. What does your organization look like? How is it structured? Where are the power structures, or where are the powerhouses within the organization? what is the degree of openness that is already existing, right? So there are ways to measure that, right? Just once you know that you have these 5 characteristics of open, you can even just create a simple Google form and ask your employees, how do you perceive us to be an organization, right, on a scale of 1 to 5. And you don't need to go out, right, but you need to have the courage to go out and ask your people for candid feedback, and have the heart to process that feedback, which means, what if your employees disagree with you that you're not an open organization, or you're not an open leader, right? How will you process that, right, without penalizing the employees, right? And so it's a level of courage that you need, a level of reflection that is needed, right? And then if you're doing an assessment for your team or for your organization, you process the data not alone. Remember, there's an element of community. The team comes together, right, and that's where you look at it together, right, and then you decide, so how do we move from here? And you identify your personal development plans, individually, but as a team, what do we need to do? What kind of behaviors we need to bring in? What kind of mindset we need to develop? And there are practices in the open practice library, which I'll share again with you, where you can have practices like a social contract, right? How we work, setting, expectations, when there is a conflict, how we solve problems, uh, how do we create psychological safety in teams, how do we take decisions, how do we disagree with each other in a respectful manner, that we don't get personally embroiled in emotional conflict, but really look at using conflict as a healthy process for improvement, right? And what do we do when we're stuck, right? So those are the kind of questions you would want to ask and begin with the process, right? So once that is at an organizational or at a team level, but I do want to narrow down on the role of leaders, right? Of open leaders, right? And like I said, it's not about of somebody who's sitting on the top and taking decision. Anybody can be an open leader, and you can step into it. So there was a second visual I had shared with you, actually. If you could bring that up now, it is, what do open leaders do?
Yeah, it's
Okay,
good.
this is good. Yeah.
Hmm.
So now, if you see, now that we've spoken about an organizational context, right, because organizations are complex, right? There's just so many dynamics and dimensions that you can't have like just one thing to look at. So you look at organization, you look at organization culture, and
Yeah.
then you narrow down on the role of a leader, right? So if you're somebody who's in a leadership role, or like I said, I want to separate that. You might be a team member who has taken the responsibility to drive an initiative, right? So you're stepping into being as a product owner, and then you are an open leader. As a follower, I can still be an open leader, right? Why? Because if you see, the role of open leaders is, we look at it as, there are 3 pillars, and this is like a red hat version. You can create your own, depending on what you try, share it back with the community so we can learn from you. But the 3 pillars that we look at is that open leaders, number one, they do is they motivate and inspire people, right? And the way to motivate and inspire people is to have a purpose, and what I spoke about, the why, right? Because we as human beings are driven by working towards a purpose and objective, and if there is something that inspires us, something that we relate to, is it really, you don't have to then go ahead and motivate people like, hey, say, come on, get motivated. you know the idea is that, can you tap into people's passions, right? So I love human behavior, I love brain science, I love seeing the psychology of working out in organizations, and within the context of my work, I get to do that. So nobody has to come and motivate me, right? I shared the why with you, to unlock the world's potential, right? That is like, just gets my juices flowing. So my manager doesn't have to call me and say, hey, Shabnoor, get motivated. Like, I'm always after his life, right? I got to do stuff. So when you have a purpose, and this begins with, like, at an individual level, do you have a purpose and a why? Have you identified that? For some it is evident, for some you have to create it, and that why can keep on shaping, right? So if you've never thought of a purpose for yourself, maybe now is the time to start. So if you want to be a leader, you need to, as somewhere, you need to know what you stand for, what resonates with you. And again, like another session maybe, where we can talk about how to find your own purpose and your own why. But open leaders really do that. They start with the why. In organizations, it's what does the organization stand for, it's just not about people coming to work and doing their job. That's such a waste of human potential, right? Imagine if you have engaged, passionate people coming to work with excitement, to contribute to, and that in turn makes your organization successful, right? uh, I mean, that is a fantastic workplace. So when passion is ignited and engagement is built, right? So that takes a lot of your time and effort into getting people to do things, because they will do it because they love what they're doing, because they relate to what they stand for, what the organization stands for. They will take ownership for it. And if you as an open leader are able to do that, well, then you've done a great job. Just get out of the way. Right? And then your job to get things done, like, get out of the way doesn't mean you disappear, right? Getting out of the way is like, let trust people to do their stuff, but you have to still be there to set the guardrails. Not only set the guardrails, I think it's more like providing a space for people to do their work, right? And decision making is something that you as a leader have to take care of, right? So although in this visual, if you see under get things done, it talks about promote meritocracy, not democracy. It's uh, a little disclaimer: we are as Red Hat moving away from the use of term meritocracy because of a lot of research that has taken place in the DEI spaces, and which has pointed towards how meritocracy is, it doesn't allow for as much inclusion as we would have believed, although it came from a place of good intent. And the idea about meritocracy is that it's the best idea winning, no matter where it comes from. But then there are a whole lot of discussions around how limiting meritocracy can be, especially in open source communities where a lot of women, a lot of people from different ethnicities, races, regions, countries are not able to participate. Maybe there are not enough skills. So yes, just as a side note, that meritocracy is what we are moving away from. But the idea is that how do you promote inclusivity of ideas, and the best ideas coming from anywhere. Your job as a leader and a manager is to create context for that, right? To filter it out and make sure employees voices means what, their ideas, their contributions get the light of the day. And when that happens, what will happen is, and when people realize their own potential and their ability, they start speaking, they start expressing. And where there are people, there will be opposing opinions. There will be different ideas, and that's what we say: let the sparks fly, let people talk it out. But your job then as a leader, as an organization, is to provide the skills and competencies to people to have meaningful conversations and discussions, ability to deal with conflict, so that we don't get sidetracked. Because sometimes difference of opinion can become a personal matter, or it can become an argument or a fight, and it takes away from the wealth. And for that, we are not mostly taught in schools how to deal with conflict, right? If ideas differ. So your job as a leader, as a manager, can be hard, because you're letting people speak up, and you'll find different have people have different ideas, different views. They'll challenge status quo, they'll ask questions. Sometimes they'll ask questions which are not the best way. Not everybody has the same kind of communication style, right? People have come from different cultural backgrounds, which means there could be clashes just because of that. A lot of misunderstandings, a lot of biases, right? All of it could actually get you off track. But the idea is that you as a manager, and as a leader, as an organization, want to create and enable people to handle such communication with skill, with grace, and with positivity, and staying rooted to the objective that you're here for, right? And that's the tough part. Right? It's easy to say, hey, everybody shut up and just go to do what the work I tell you to do. But that's not how we do it in open organizations, right? And the other thing the another important thing that open leaders do is set direction, right? Because as an organization, we are heading towards, there is an objective that we're going to. So and to set direction, you need to take decisions, right? To take decisions to which direction you're going, how you're going to go there, what do you need to do, all of that, right? And your role is that of a catalyst, right? Your team, your people are skilled and capable. We are in a knowledge economy. We're moving away from like the industrial mindset, where people were just showing up on the line and doing their work and going back. But we are, now we're in knowledge economy, where people bring knowledge, expertise, and skills. They know, many times your employees will know more than you, And your job is to get the best out of people, right? And as a leader, of course, there'll be times that you will be accountable for decisions, so of course you're invested in taking those decisions together. So as much as you can create inclusive decision making so that there is shared ownership and shared accountability, it takes the pressure off you. Then all of you are a part of the process, and then you're driving together. So I'm going to pause. I know it's a lot of information, but do you see, we started with organization, and now we've spoken about role of leadership.
Yeah,
And
so
then,
we also covered like open culture and individuality at the same time.
yes,
Like
yeah,
we have discussed how the five essential parts are really also well bound, I must say. This is like the five essential parts are so important of the open culture and the open organizations part of a leader being able to understand their employees and even set direction to that. Like it is well bound, I must say.
yeah, and it's just been evolutionary, right? It's not that
Right.
I mean, the parts of it were known, but I think that's where open source has taught us that things can be done differently, right? We can move away from set conventional ways. And it's interesting, just yesterday I was having a conversation with a wonderful colleague of mine. She's an open leader and a practitioner and speaks in many forums, and we were talking about how the mindset, like, what is open really, right? And it's about moving away from those set structures. And she was comparing it with how our thinking is so set in the industrial age that we talk about when you talk about doing things, like we think of it in mechanistic ways. We equate it to machines, right? Start, stop, continue. There was another thing she spoke about was how we run meetings, right? How we start initiatives and stop initiatives. It's so mechanistic if you start looking at it. But we're moving from we're moving into a stage where we're talking about ecosystems, right? Where we radiate, we network, right? It's about coming together, system thinking, for example, that there are parts that come together that contribute to the whole, right? And it's organic. It radiates out. So the mental models have to change, like our thinking has to change, right? That's why our organizations are designed in such hierarchical way, because we're still kind of rooted in that industrial age sort of thinking. And it's the new economy, the new way where we are heading, will require open agile ways of working, which is different, which means how do we upskill ourselves, how do we create new mental models, right? And that's both internal work and it's external work. So to wrap it up, you had asked me, like, what could we do? Because it's nice to hear about it, but mostly where people struggle is like, but where do I get started? I understand the concept, it makes a lot of sense to me. And to that I will say we have compiled so there is a place called Open Practices Library, where you can go and explore some of the practices. These are open and agile practices based on empirical research and trial by and experts have spend time creating and trying these practices out. We use these practices in our residencies, and I'll talk a little bit about it later. But these practices can really help you find, like I said, retrospectives. How do you take feedback? How do you give feedback? How do you strategize? How do you take decisions? What are the tools that you could use? How do you prioritize? What are the practices? How do you save time and take quick decisions with everybody included, right? How do you work in remote environments? There's just a whole lot of stuff that is there, which you can pick and choose depending on your context, right? There's not like one or two things. But best I like is one is that I learned a lot from was having a social contract. So check that out to begin with first. You had also asked me about open management practices. So if you're in a management position, which means you're having people management responsibilities, open management practices. I'll just take a little moment to give you a little background. You can decide to include it or not, but uh, hopefully, this will give our audience some insights and references on how they can cultivate open ways of managing. So in 2019, Red Hat released the open management practices internally at Red Hat, and this was done after about a year long research and study involving about 1,300 Red Hatters, employed at multiple levels, right, from some senior most to the junior most, and using open decision framework that I had spoken about. I'll give you links of all of these later on. They are openly available, true to our approach. And this work is our commitment at Red Hat to deliver exceptional employee experience, sustaining open culture. Like I said, it has to be sustained. It's not static. And how do we drive innovation for our customers? So I'll not deep dive into it today, but I'll give you the link and I invite you to take a look at it. There are certain key specific practices as a manager or as a leader manager, depends on how you use the word, and you can test these out. You can do an assessment. You can learn from it. So I'll share the links with you about open management practices. I'm not deep
Sure.
diving into it because again, it'll take almost an hour to do it.
That's all right. That's all right. Yeah. So, wow, that was really insightful, I must say. Really insightful.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so like I wanted to know if there are any other sound bites you would like to share with the audience.
I would say, I mean, there's quite a lot of sound bites I already shared with you.
I'm sure that's all
Um,
right.
yeah, but what I would say is in a nutshell that becoming an open organization, becoming an open leader requires get interested in the topic and deep dive a little bit. It's a relatively new way of functioning. I would invite you to start reading up. I would say go to the open practice library. There are definitions of open leadership and open organization. Deep dive into that. I would also, yeah, I mean, just this month we have also released, the community has released, this is not Red Hat specifically, but the open organization community, which is open to anyone. If you're interested, anybody can be a part of that community. So open organization community has released after 7-8 months of effort, the open leadership assessment. Which you can actually go and you can fork it, you can improve on it, but you can assess yourself, and you could also ask your colleagues or people that you work with to give you some kind of insight, give you feedback, and then you can compare. Is your view, how do you see yourself as an open leader? Is it the same on how people are seeing you as an open leader? And that's where you will find opportunities for growth, and also you'll get input into your own assumptions of yourself will either be validated or they will be disrupted. So I would invite you to do that, right? Get active and start trying implementing practices in day-to-day life. Open leadership and open culture can actually be applied also in your personal life, right? These factors you see, if used with discretion and judgment, good judgment, can really enhance the quality of your life, because they shape up how you uh, become as a professional, but also as a person, because it develops your character strengths, your ability as a person. So you'll find yourself continuously working towards improvement. That would be my soundbite.
So, thank you so much for sharing your valuable insights with us. And follow for more content, subscribe to Engati, tap the bell icon, and to access to exclusive content from our thought leaders from around the globe. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you with new experts soon.